Do you want to take a course, maybe read more, or even start journaling because you know that it would make you a better leader, but you don't do that because you don't have the support of those around you to do those things? That's holding you back, my dear. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about what you need to do to feel supported so that you can do those things that are going to help you grow and develop as a leader. Hey, my dear, I'm leadership development coach Kathy Archer, and I help women leaders enjoy impactful leadership. And let me tell you, if you aren't growing and developing yourself, you probably aren't enjoying your leadership because you feel stuck and stagnant. There's nothing any worse than being stuck in the same job or position or more likely just place where you feel for a long time. If you feel stuck, it's probably because you're not growing and developing. So when we think about the things that you need to do to develop yourself, often we talk about you need to take a course, you need to read some more, or you need to journal. But what we say is things like, I don't have the support of people around me to do those things. Well, let's stop and define what we mean by support. If you are watching the show, put a comment in about what you mean by support. When we're thinking about, I need the support of people around me to read more or to take a course or to journal more. What is it that we mean by support? Because often what we're doing is we're just sort of throwing that out there, and it becomes the quick response we give when we say why we're not growing and developing ourselves. I just need to move my comments over here. Okay, got it. Here's what most people are saying. I don't have time. People aren't giving me the time. People aren't supporting me in the funding, the money to do this, or they're not encouraging me or cheering me on. And there's other ways that we sort of define lack of support, but I want to dig into those a little bit deeper today, because if that's our idea of support, in this week's podcast, Janice, Cunning, and I go deeper into those areas. No money, no time, no support of people around you. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into sort of what it is when we talk about that support. I'll put the link in if you want to listen to this week's podcast. But when we define those support, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I'm covering what I wanted to talk about today, you guys. Okay, so no time. Here's the thing. When I look back to when I was working on my degree, so I had a diploma from college. Then when I had 4 kids and I was working full time as a leader and trying to live a balanced life, I decided it was time to go back and get my degree. So I worked at it for 8 years, one course at a time. Now, I needed the time to do the coursework. So I found the time in the evening, which was a little bit of a rub because I had been away from my kids all day, right? So that was kind of one of the opportunities, though, for me to find the time. But here's the thing. During that time, I would go sit at the desk in our bedroom and I would start studying and taking notes, and I was doing online learning even back then. And there was a part of me that felt like I didn't have that time. And I had to shift that mindset to believe that I did have that time. Part of what got in the way was the mom guilt, the wife guilt. Oh my God, my husband worked all day too. Or the belief that he wasn't doing it right when he was, parenting our kids and getting them ready for bed and all of that stuff. The time was actually there. It's that I didn't allow myself to believe that I had that time. So there was always that extra guilt. And that extra guilt and that extra friction didn't give me the freedom to just sit down and study and get at it. There was half of my brain that was feeling guilty all the time. So the time. One of the things that we need to do is when we have the time, we need to take the time. Often what we do is we have the time, but again, that guilt sets in. So we're like, oh, well, I'll just push it aside. Or you have the time during your workday scheduled, but somebody knocks on their door and says, can I just steal you for 1 minute? We need to take the time we are given, and then we need to communicate that. This is the time I'm given. This is the money I have. This is the support that I need from you to do this. So we need to take what's given to us. We need to communicate our needs. And then the third point about that is we often need to ask for that. So take what's given, communicate it, and ask for it, both with time and money. And when I think about money, sometimes the money doesn't feel like it's there in our organizations. We are short on funds for training. We often will put our frontline staff first. We feel like sometimes that we have to do sort of the program-based learning before we do the extra stuff or what we deem as extra training. And we need to, again, shift that. The money is there. It might not be there in the way that's the easiest to access. And so you might have to switch things around. Again, in the podcast, Janice and I talk a little bit more about the need to put your foot down and take responsibility for your own growth and development. But in terms of money, sometimes when I decided that I was going to go back and work on my coach training, it was a fair bit of money. And I asked my boss for it, and he's like, nope, don't have it. Not within our budget. So then I waited a little while and asked again. He's like, nope, not here in the budget. So then I had to get creative. And so I went and found a bursary that helped me get some of that training. Often that sort of adage that we have is that anything worth getting, you have to work hard for, right? And so sometimes you have to put a little bit of grit into finding the money. There are tons of bursaries and grants and things out there. There's also existing money that you can rechannel. We don't, as leaders, have to take the basic training all the time. We already have the skills, and in reality, we don't need to continue to develop those skills. We need to develop leadership skills. Our frontline staff need to be developing the frontline skills. One of the things that I was sadly most relieved about was when our organization decided if there was a certain number of people in the office and there was a whole bunch of criteria, but that I didn't have to do first aid training anymore. I'm like, hallelujah, I'd done it every 2 years for how many years? But that freed some of my training dollars up. It freed some of my time up because, again, I wasn't going to visit families anymore. I was leading a team. I needed to develop my leadership skills. So sometimes we have to see what money's already there. So again, when we're talking about the money and the time, see what's already there, communicate our needs, and then ask for it if we need to ask for it in a different way. Now, I want to talk about the third sort of definition we have of support, and that is that cheerleader or that, yay, you did it, or yes, you can. I really think you should take this course. That way that somebody is our but standing behind us going, you need to do this, you need to do that, you did it, yay. We look for that extrinsic motivation all the time. We look for somebody to put us up, not on a pedestal, but lift us up and say, this training is good for you. And wow, you did that. That's amazing. And while those are incredibly cool things and an important part of life, those extrinsic motivators don't often truly motivate us in a way that is going to keep us moving forward, but also that feels good long term. So last week, the podcast, the Surviving to Thriving podcast, made it to number 2 on the Apple podcast list for nonprofit podcasts in Canada. Like, I was not expecting that. That blew me out of the water because it had been sitting down at 40 and then 30, and then all of a sudden it jumped up to number 2. Now, I posted that on social media, and I get lots of likes and comments and things like that. But I wait for my husband to get home, and I wait for him to check his social media, and I wait for him to say, oh, good job, Kathy. And he doesn't. And I'm like, okay, did you see this? And he's like, no, I didn't see it. Okay, I didn't tell him what it was. I just said, did you see my post? But there's this part of me that is waiting for him to, cheer me on. And he is my biggest cheerleader. But that ultimately isn't going to encourage me to put my butt in this chair every day and provide this material for you. What's going to put me here is when I know I'm making a difference for you, when I can feel it. When I put that podcast out there, or when I do this video and you comment, or you send me an email, or you share it, or somehow I have a conversation with you and you say, that little piece that you shared there helped me to do this. That's what feeds my soul. That's what makes me do this work. Not because I got so many likes on my post on social media or because my husband patted me on the back. Now, what's interesting to note about that is often, though, the support is actually there, we don't see it. So when I look back at some of my performance appraisals when I was in an organization and I was leading, at the time and looking back probably 5 or 10 years ago, I would have said, I didn't get the support I need. It wasn't there. That I wasn't encouraged. My organization, my team, they didn't value me. They weren't there for me. But now, when I look back at those performance appraisals, oh my God, the comments are very clear that they seen the skills I had, that they recognized the impact I was making, that they were encouraging my growth and development, that they sent me on training, that they seen the effects of the training. All of that rah cheerleader stuff was there. I just chose not to see it at the time because my focus was on the negative. I was looking at where they didn't support me, where I felt neglected, where I felt that I wasn't being developed in the way that I thought I could or should be developed. So we often have to, when we're thinking about that encouragement, I had 3 points here. Listen for it, accept it, and then the third one I had was brag about it. That's the other thing I wanted to share. So we have to listen for it. When somebody says, wow, that made a big difference in our client population. You got to listen for that. What they are acknowledging is the work that you did made a difference. They may not say, hey, you did this and that's amazing and pat you on the back, but they might recognize that the work you and your team did or you did individually had this impact. You have to listen for that encouragement and support. You also have to accept it. Oftentimes, when feedback comes in, what's the very first thing we do? Oh, good job. What do we do? What do we do when somebody comments our appearance? Oh, this old thing, I just pulled it out of the closet. Or, oh, I just got this on sale at the clearance rack. We minimize the compliments that we get, the feedback we get. When we hear, good job, that was amazing. Oh my God, that made an impact. Wow, how did you figure out how to do that? We have to hear those and accept those as confirmation that somebody's noticing the impact we're having, that we are learning and growing and developing, and that it's making a difference. And then that third part is brag about it. We as women leaders as women in general, are the worst for bragging about our accomplishments. And this is like proven again and again and again in study after study. If there's a job uh, out there, a job that they're looking for applicants, and a man sees it and he looks at the 10 criteria and he says, yeah, I have about 4 of them. I'll throw my resume in. A woman looks at it and she can see that she has 9 of them, and she'll notice what she doesn't have and she'll say, I'm not qualified for the job. We minimize that stuff. We need to brag about ourselves more, not in a boastful, arrogant way, but we need to talk about what we're capable of, what our strengths are, what our gifts, our talents are. We need to share that. That's going to help get there. So I know I kind of did around a little bit confusing today. Had my notes and I wasn't as clear as I had hoped I'd be. All right, so let me summarize with my notes this time. So if you want to take a course, if you want to maybe read more, or if you want to maybe start that journaling, often what happens is we hold ourselves back because we say we don't have the support. And by support, we often mean time, money, or somebody cheering us on. First thing I want you to do is define what you mean by support. So what does that mean? If it's time, how much time? What kind of time? When does that time show up? If you're thinking about money, again, how much money? Is it that you want them to pay for the whole course or to buy you the book? Or is it just simply to get you a library card, maybe so that you can access the book? What does that mean? And then when you're talking about that support, what is it that you're looking for? Do you want the accolades and the pat on the back? Or are you looking for the recognition of the impact that your growth and development has had? Or Is there a way that you're just looking for somebody to acknowledge that you're committed to growing and developing yourself? And then look for where you already have those, look for where you can ask for more of that, and listen in for where it's already there. And then, of course, brag about yourself. Not, again, in a boastful way, but talk about your skills and developments. Talk about what you did. If I didn't tell you today that the podcast got there, or that I had my degree, or show up here every week, you wouldn't know that I had this information, or you wouldn't know about the resources that I have on my website unless I show up here and tell you about it. We all need to do that with all of the things that we are learning and growing and developing in ourselves, the skills and talents and gifts we have, and the way that we show up. We need to communicate that to people. This is what I love to do. This is what I'm good at. This is why you should put me in that position. This is why the training is going to help our team and our organization. This is the impact it's going to have when I spend a little bit more time every week reading or taking this course. If you have found today's information to be helpful, then you are probably going to love the training library. Inside the training library is ongoing personal and professional development opportunities. And the challenge for most women in nonprofits is that we think we can't afford those, or that we can't have access to someone like myself, a personal coach or a leadership coach or a mentor, because you or your organization can't afford it. And that is so not true, my dear. Inside of the training library, you find affordable, ongoing, and easily accessible access to tons of personal development, as well as me at your fingertips. That way, when you hit those inevitable bumps and humps in leadership, you will know exactly where to go to get the support and training you need. This week, I popped in a new course inside the training library, and it is all about just a quick weekly scan to see if you are on track with your leadership and the three components that you need to be focused on. What I also did in there is I created some extra links to all of the tools you have accessible. So there's, 5 or 6 different tools around communicating with your team and dealing with team morale, conflict, coaching your team, supervision, all of those kinds of things. I put all the tools in one spot and with the links back to the resources. The other one I did was, let me think about it for a minute. So why is it not coming to me? Yeah, nope, gone. Anyhow, there's new courses and stuff being developed every month for that. There's webinars and stuff going in there. So if you are not a member of the training library, head over to kathyarcher.com/library and you'll find all the information. And if you want to know more about this sort of mindset shift around not believing you have the support to develop yourself, head over to the podcast. The link is in the notes. Look in your favorite podcast app, Surviving to Thriving podcast, because it's this commitment to ongoing personal and professional development. It's really about growing you and developing yourself that is going to help you ditch survival mode, where most of us are hanging out, and move to thriving in both our leadership and our lives. Go make the rest of your day awesome, my dear.